The rain hammered against the windows of the hospital room, creating a melancholic symphony that seemed to echo the tumultuous state of his soul. His eyes, bloodshot and weary, stared vacantly at the empty hospital bed where she had lain just hours ago. The machines that had been a constant and comforting hum were now silent, and the sterile scent of the room was thick with the lingering aroma of antiseptic and loss. The man's name was Richard, and his heart was shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The nurse's gentle knock at the door was the first sound to break the oppressive silence. She offered her condolences with a sad smile and informed him that he could take his wife and their stillborn child to the funeral home whenever he was ready. Ready? The word seemed ludicrous in the context of his current reality. How could one ever be ready to bury the love of their life and an innocent soul they never had the chance to know? He nodded mechanically, and she left the room, her footsteps retreating down the hallway, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the echoes of a future that would never be. His golden retriever, Max, sensed his master's pain and whimpered softly at his feet. Richard reached down to pat the dog's head, finding solace in the warmth and unconditional love that only a pet could provide. Max was more than just a dog. He was his confidant, his protector, and now his sole companion in a world that had turned cold and desolate. As Richard made the necessary arrangements, Max remained by his side, his golden eyes leaving his master's face. The dog knew something was wrong. The usual cheerfulness and laughter that filled their home were gone, replaced by a heavy shroud of grief. The drive to the funeral home was a blur, the rain outside mirroring the torrential downpour of tears within Richard's heart. The following days passed in a haze of despair. Richard found himself unable to eat, sleep, or even speak. Max, ever vigilant, never left his side. He would place his paw on Richard's leg, his way of saying, "I'm here," and together they would sit for hours in silence, the ticking of the clock a painful reminder of the moment slipping away without her. One evening, as the city lights began to flicker to life, Richard found himself in their bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of their shared life. Photographs of happier times, her favorite book resting open on the nightstand, the faint scent of her perfume on the pillows. It was all too much, and he crumpled to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Max approached him cautiously, nuzzling his hand. Richard wrapped his arms around the dog, burying his face in the soft fur, and whispered, "I can't do this without her, Max. I can't." The dog's response was a soft, comforting whine, his tail thumping gently against the floorboards. It was as if Max understood the depth of his pain, and in that moment, Richard knew that he wasn't truly alone. As the weeks turned into months, Richard and Max formed an unbreakable bond. The dog took on the role of keeping him from the precipice of mental breakdown. Max would force him to go for walks, to eat, to interact with the outside world, all with a silent persistence that was both comforting and maddening. The rain had long since stopped, but the dark clouds of grief still hovered over Richard's life. One fateful night, as Richard sat in the living room, the bottle of whiskey he had been nursing slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. The sound jolted him from his numbness, and he looked up to find Max staring at him with a mix of concern and disappointment. It was a look he hadn't seen since their early days of training when Max had caught him slipping up. "What do you want from me, boy?" Richard slurred, his voice thick with self-pity. "You can't bring her back. No one can." Max's gaze never wavered, and in his eyes, Richard saw a spark of something he hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. He stumbled to his feet, the room spinning, and with Max's unyielding stare as his guide, he made his way to the kitchen to clean up the mess. As he picked up the shards of glass, he felt a surge of anger and despair, throwing the broom against the wall. The clatter brought him to his senses, and he slid down to the floor, defeated. Max approached again, placing his paw on Richard's hand. The warmth and pressure of the dog's touch brought a sudden clarity to him. "I'm sorry." Richard choked out, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'm just so lost without her." Max leaned into him, his fur wet with Richard's tears, and let out a low whine that seemed to speak volumes. It was a sound that said, "I know," and "It's okay." It was a sound that was a promise of unconditional love and support. The next morning, Richard awoke to find Max sitting by the bed, his tail wagging gently. The room was suffused with a soft light, the shadows of their pain seemingly banished by the new day. Richard took a deep breath, feeling a glimmer of determination rise within him. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he could choose to face the future with the strength she had always seen in him. With Max by his side, Richard started to rebuild his life, piece by shattered piece. He attended grief counseling, made new friends, and even started to laugh again, though it felt foreign at first. He realized that while he would never truly be free of the pain, he could learn to live with it, to carry it like a scar rather than a burden. One particularly difficult day, as he sat in the counselor's office, the weight of his sorrow threatening to crush him, he thought of Max. The dog had been his rock, his anchor in the stormy sea of despair. He had shown him that love didn't die with loss. It merely transformed, taking on new shapes and forms. During a particularly intense session, Richard found himself shouting, "I hate her for leaving me." The words hung in the air, heavy with the rage and sorrow that had been festering within him. The counselor nodded solemnly and said, "It's okay to be angry, Richard, but remember, anger is just another facet of love." That night, Richard took Max for a long walk in the rain. The cold droplets soothed Richard's face, reminding him of her gentle kisses, and the pitter-patter against the pavement echoed her laughter in his heart. He broke down, leaning against a lamppost, the rain mixing with his tears. Max, ever loyal, sat by his side, looking up with those knowing eyes as if saying, "Feel it all. I'm here." Amidst the downpour, Richard whispered, "I'm so angry, Max. So angry she left us." Max tilted his head, listening intently. Richard continued, "But I miss her so much. I miss her every minute of every day." The dog whined softly, placing his paw on Richard's shaking hand. It was a silent conversation, filled with more emotion than any words could convey. They remained there, two souls sharing an unbearable pain, until the storm inside Richard's chest matched the one outside. Eventually, the rain subsided, and Richard picked himself up. With Max leading the way, they returned home, soaked but somehow lighter. The house was still filled with her ghost, but it no longer felt like a tomb. It was a sanctuary of memories, where they could heal together. Over time, Richard found purpose in their shared grief. He wrote a blog about his journey, offering comfort to others who walked the same path. Max became a therapy dog, bringing solace to those in need. The two of them became a testament to the power of love and loss, forever intertwined, forever evolving. One sunny afternoon, as Richard sat at his desk, the sun casting a warm glow through the window, he looked at a picture of her smiling face. He felt a pang of sadness, but it was no longer a dagger to the heart. It was a reminder that she was still with him, in every beat of his heart and every wag of Max's tail. "Thank you," he murmured to the empty room, knowing she could hear him. "Thank you for Max. Thank you for teaching me how to live again." And with that, he took a deep breath and continued to write his words, a tapestry of hope for the brokenhearted. The months that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. Some days, Richard felt as though he could conquer the world with Max by his side, and others, the weight of his loss was so profound that he could barely get out of. The blog grew in popularity, and the comments from readers who had also suffered loss touched his heart. It was through their shared experiences that he found a glimmer of strength to face each new day. One evening, as he was about to publish a particularly raw and honest post, there was a knock at the door. He hesitated, the pain of unexpected visitors still fresh. But Max barked with excitement, his tail wagging uncontrollably, and something in the dog's demeanor told Richard that this was different. He opened the door to find a young woman standing on the porch, her eyes red from crying. She clutched a bouquet of flowers to her chest, and her raincoat was soaked from the sudden downpour that had started outside. "I'm sorry to bother you," she choked out. "I just had to tell you, Max helped me today." Her words struck a chord within Richard, and he stepped aside to let her in. She told him how she had been contemplating ending her life, lost in a fog of despair after her husband's sudden death. But then Max had found her, lying in the park, and had nudged his way into her heart, offering a silent but powerful beacon of hope. She had read about Richard and Max online and had come to thank them both. Their conversation was intense, filled with a kind of raw emotion that only those who have known true loss can understand. She spoke of her pain, and Richard listened, nodding in silent solidarity. And then she told him something that shook him to his core. "You saved me, Richard. Your words, your story, it gave me the strength to keep going." He looked at her in disbelief. How could his pain possibly help someone else? Yet, as he gazed into her eyes, he saw a reflection of himself, a mirror of his own grief, transformed into something beautiful. It was a revelation that shook him to the core, and he realized that perhaps his suffering had a purpose after all. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Richard found himself caught between the pain of his past and the promise of a new future. Max was there for every step, his eyes ever watchful, his tail a constant metronome of comfort. The dog had become not just his companion but his guardian, a living embodiment of the love that had been ripped away from him. One night, as they lay in bed, Richard whispered into the darkness, "I think I'm ready, Max." Ready to let her go and live again. Max's response was a gentle nudge, a soft whine, and a warm lick to his cheek. The funeral was held on a crisp autumn day, the leaves whispering in the wind as they fell from the trees. Richard stood at her graveside, Max sitting stoically beside him. He felt the warmth of the sun on his back and the coolness of the earth beneath his feet, and he knew she was there watching over them. He turned to Max, his eyes filled with unshed tears. "We're going to be okay, buddy," he said, his voice strong and sure. "We're going to live for her, for us." Max's tail wagged once, and Richard took it as a sign of approval. He placed a bouquet of flowers on her grave and whispered a final goodbye, feeling her love wrap around him like a warm embrace. In the months that followed, Richard's life began to take on a new shape. He found himself laughing more, smiling at strangers, and even starting to date again. It was strange and scary, but it was also liberating. He had carried her with him, in his heart and in his soul, but now he was learning to walk without the weight of his grief dragging him down. One night, as he lay in bed with a woman who understood his pain, he felt a warmth spread through him, not just from her touch, but from the realization that love didn't die. It merely changed form, like the seasons, ever present, but never the same.